They say when you die your life flashes before your eyes. But for me it wasn't my life. It was all the lies. The betrayals. The faces I thought I knew. The ones who smiled as they buried me. And in that final moment, as the cold slipped into my bones, I realized something far more chilling than death itself. I had saved the wrong man. And he made sure I paid for it. But this is not the end. It's where everything begins. There's something quiet about drowning. A cruel sort of calm. You feel the resistance of the water, your limbs slowing down, your heartbeat turning into a distant echo. And in that silence I remembered everything. The night I pulled him from the wreckage, covered in blood and guilt. The way his eyes found mine, hollow, broken, begging. He was supposed to die that night. Maybe he should have. But I saved him. My name was Elira, once a quiet daughter of the Ainsworth estate, a family name that echoed across boardrooms and masquerade balls. We were high society's elite. But I was the adopted one. The outsider. The token charity case taken in for show. They smiled at me in public, but I learned to read the weight behind every glance, every condescending pat on the head. I wasn't blood. I was a prop. And then came Selim. He was magnetic in the way that fire is beautiful before it burns you. Brilliant, devastating, a man carved from charm and ambition. He was the heir of the Valemont dynasty, our family's closest rival and secret obsession. He was never supposed to be mine. But he was broken once. And I made the mistake of loving him when no one else did. He crashed his car on the cliffs near our estate. Drunk, reckless, fleeing some scandal buried deep in the Valemont vault. Everyone else left him to die. But I didn't. I dragged him from the flames. I stayed by his bedside for months. I defended him to my family even when it started costing me. And he thanked me at first. Then he married my adopted sister, Serafina. Elegant, poised, perfect Serafina. The golden girl. Ainsworth's crown jewel. I didn't even get an explanation. Just a wedding invitation addressed to dearest Elira, and a smirk on her lips when I confronted her. He was never yours, she whispered with glass in hand. You were just the warm-up act. But what shattered me, what truly shattered me, was Selim's response. You shouldn't have saved me, he said, like I was the villain in some twisted fable. You gave me guilt I didn't ask for. I married someone who makes sense. And with that they left. Together. To build an empire on lies and ambition, while I was cast aside like a used bandage. What came after was slow. The erosion of my sanity. My name erased from family contracts. My art, my work, my legacy, all discredited. My friendships bought out or threatened. Rumors spread. I was too emotional. Too erratic. Damaged goods. Then one winter's night I stood on the frozen lake where Selim first kissed me and Serafina first betrayed me, and the ice cracked beneath my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just let go. But fate has a strange sense of humor. I woke up 3 years earlier. In my old bedroom. The pink wallpaper I hated. The untouched canvases. The creak in the floorboard by the window. And outside, the world was the same, oblivious to what I now knew. That Selim's accident hadn't even happened yet. I had been reborn. And this time I wouldn't save him. The first thing I did was hide the panic. The second was to listen. Eavesdrop. Preserve. The old me was naive, hungry for approval, desperate to belong. But the new me? She was quiet thunder. I watched as Serafina played her innocent game with our parents, curating her image with precision. I watched as Selim flirted with destruction, already drowning in women, deals, and secrets. I listened to boardroom whispers, traced bribes passed in envelopes, and followed late-night calls that always ended in threats. I didn't speak. Not yet. I painted. The same way I used to, but now every stroke was a disguise, every gallery meeting a reconnaissance mission. I smiled at Serafina over tea and memorized her schedules. I laughed at Selim's jokes at parties and fed him lines that led him deeper into ruin. They had no idea. I didn't need to destroy them outright. That would be too easy. Too quick. No, I needed to unravel them from within. Like rot beneath a golden statue. Selim was easy. He thought with his ego. I fed it, planted ideas. You deserve more than Valemont. Ainsworth would crumble without you. Serafina is too polished, too cold. And watched the cracks form. I arranged meetings with his rivals under the guise of loyalty. Made them offers that would tempt him into betraying his own. Serafina was more delicate. She was strategic. But vanity was her Achilles heel. I sent her anonymous letters filled with rumors, half-truths and full lies. I let her paranoia grow. I forged flirty texts from Selim's assistant, planted lipstick on his coats, hinted at disloyalty in carefully worded gossip that always found its way to her ears. And as the Ainsworth and Valemont families celebrated their secret merger, thinking they were creating a dynasty, I pulled string after string from the shadows. I had walked the halls of the Ainsworth estate once before, meek, soft-spoken, always 2 steps behind Serafina's perfection. But now every step I took echoed with quiet purpose. The mansion hadn't changed. Chandeliers like constellations overhead, imported marble that swallowed your footsteps, and walls that whispered secrets if you listened hard enough. The Ainsworth matriarch Eleanor hadn't aged a day. Regal in her diamonds and disdain, she looked at me the same way she did back then, with polite toleration. She didn't trust me, and for once she was right not to. "I'm glad you've come home," she said that evening over dinner, wine swirling in her crystal glass like blood and water. "You always were the modest one." Modest. The word clung like dust. Serafina, across the table, gave a small smile as if to say, "Play along, little sister." Her engagement ring to Selim caught the light like a weapon. "I needed to reset," I answered softly, pushing my hair back with practiced grace. "Being out there, it reminded me where I belong." Why? Every word of it. But convincing. My voice didn't tremble. My gaze didn't flinch. The game had begun. Kept a notebook. Hidden under the loose floorboard behind the bed, it contained everything I remembered from the previous timeline. Meetings, betrayals, deaths, and secrets that hadn't happened yet but would. Unless I moved the pieces. The first piece, Arthur Blaine. He was a minor board member in Ainsworth's tech subsidiary last time. Overlooked, underpaid, loyal to a fault. They scapegoated him when the merger scandal broke. He took his life 2 years from now, his name erased in shame. This time I found him early. Pretended to need a tutor for economic theory. We met in cafes. I asked too many questions and he noticed but not enough to suspect. I warned him subtly about upcoming shifts in the company, and when he looked at me like I was reading prophecies I smiled and said, "Some instincts are just sharper." He started digging. Quietly. And I let him. The second piece, Marianne Vaux. Selim's former lover, discarded and threatened into silence. She had been pregnant once. The baby had miscarried, but I always believed she was forced to. Selim erased her from history, then destroyed her career. I sought her out under a pseudonym. Bought one of her forgotten sculptures. Invited her to a private gallery showing and offered her space to showcase her work again. Under my patronage. She didn't recognize me yet. But that was fine. Seeds take time. Ainsworth's annual masquerade. A tradition steeped in grandeur and hypocrisy. The perfect place to set the next phase into motion. I arrived fashionably late. My mask was obsidian, etched in gold, feathers curling like smoke above my brow. My dress, a flowing silhouette of midnight, moved like oil on silk. I was unrecognizable to most but not to Selim. He found me by the garden terrace, glass in hand, curiosity flickering behind his lion mask. "I don't believe we've met," he said. "But we have," I replied, turning just enough for the light to catch my cheekbone, the exact angle he once memorized in another life. He blinked. "Wait, Elira?" I sipped my drink. "I'm surprised you remember." His smile faltered. Just for a moment. And in that flicker I saw him trying to reconcile past and present. I saw fear. "You've changed," he said finally. "So have you," I said. "Some things grow. Others rot." Before he could respond, Serafina appeared at his side, her mask shaped like a swan, elegant, icy, flawless. She looked at me too long, too closely. "Darling," she said to Selim, "come. We need to speak with father before the announcement." The engagement announcement. Right on cue. "I'll be watching," I murmured. That night I leaked confidential documents to a financial columnist. The beginnings of Ainsworth's unethical acquisitions in emerging markets. Just enough to stir interest, not enough to expose me. The story published 3 days later, and the press began circling like vultures. Selim, furious, blamed Serafina for being careless with her devices. Serafina accused him of mishandling communications. Their first real argument broke out in the privacy of the study, but I had planted a phone with a recording device behind the curtains. Later, I sent a clip of their fight to an anonymous gossip channel with the headline, "Power Couple or Powder Keg? Ainsworth's Royal Pair Under Fire." It went viral. As their image fractured, I moved behind the scenes. Reconnected with old allies who had once been discarded by the family. I offered protection, funding, and loyalty in exchange for silence and access. A few remembered me with pity. Others with respect. All accepted. I started appearing in magazines again. Art shows. Silent auctions. High society took note of Elira Ainsworth's return, and wondered aloud if the prodigal daughter had finally bloomed. Eleanor, sensing my rising influence, invited me to more family meetings. Serafina, threatened, tried to corner me over lunch. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she asked, stirring her espresso too violently. Enjoying what? I blinked, pure innocence. Coming back. Stealing attention. Stirring trouble. I leaned in. "You always saw me as competition. Isn't it funny? I never had to lift a finger. You do that all on your own." Her hand trembled. It was working. I hosted my first formal dinner, an Ainsworth tradition reserved for senior members only. I invited every important name in our circle, including Marianne Vaux and Arthur Blaine, both rebranded and thriving under my support. I made sure Selim and Serafina were seated directly across from each other, flanked by the very people they'd betrayed. The air was thick with tension, every toast a double-edged blade. Halfway through, I unveiled a painting called False Harvest, a surreal piece showing wolves feasting at a table, unaware the house around them was on fire. Selim went pale. Serafina crushed her wine glass in her palm. I smiled. Art imitates life. The Valemont estate was not built for love. It was a fortress masquerading as a palace. Its halls were colder than the stone that shaped them, its portraits more alive than the people who walked beneath them. This was Selim's world. Ruthless, calculated, dripping in tradition and self-interest. Once I had walked here as a guest. Now I entered as a shadow. After the lawsuit hit their foundation, panic simmered just beneath the surface. I knew Selim would start investigating, trying to find the source of the leak. But I had scattered my breadcrumbs with surgical precision. Nothing tied to me directly. Arthur Blaine had sent the documents under a false whistleblower name. Marianne, now protected by my quiet legal team, refused interviews but sculpted a piece titled, "Inheritance of Fire," that went viral across the art world, drawing attention to Valemont's past indiscretions. My web was growing. But it wasn't enough to unravel Selim's empire. I needed to cut deeper, into the alliances that held him afloat. That meant walking into the lion's den. I arrived under the pretense of business, a potential investor in Valemont's expansion into sustainable tech. In truth, I came to study the enemy. The boardroom smelled of cedar and ego. Selim stood at the head of the table, perfectly pressed suit, his signature navy tie, unchanged from the man I once pulled from fire. He introduced me with cold politeness, unsure whether I was friend or threat. That hesitation was my opening. As we discussed green partnerships, I laced my language with veiled insults and subtle double meanings. I questioned expense reports in a tone that sounded curious, not accusatory. I complimented Serafina's influence in the Ainsworth brand with just enough emphasis to make the male board members question Selim's autonomy. I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to fracture. Afterward, Selim followed me down the hallway. "What are you doing?" he asked, low voice like a knife behind silk. I turned slowly. "Isn't it obvious? I'm finally becoming someone worth marrying." The flash of anger in his eyes was almost satisfying. He didn't know what scared him more, losing control or losing the illusion that he ever had it. It wasn't just Selim or Serafina who orchestrated my fall in the past. They were executioners. But someone else had written the order. Someone higher. I found the first clue in a forgotten ledger, an old Ainsworth transaction buried under shell companies. It traced back to Marcus Rowan, an elder statesman in Valemont's inner circle. He was charming, grandfatherly, and entirely unremarkable by design. But in the last timeline, he had brokered the deal that cut me out of the family trust and sealed Selim and Serafina's merger. So I paid him a visit. In a quiet club in Mayfair over cigars and cognac, I offered a deal of my own. Imagine a world, I said, where Selim loses credibility, where Serafina is discredited. But the Valemont name, your legacy remains intact. All I need is a list of his offshore contacts and your silence. He looked amused at first, then intrigued, then greedy. Power attracts power. Rowan agreed on the condition I never speak his name. A ghost deal sealed in shadows. I walked away with access to accounts that would lead Selim to ruin if made public. But I wouldn't leak them. Not yet. First, I had to turn his inner circle into a battleground. With the account numbers in hand, I commissioned a forensic audit under another false identity. The results were sent to an anonymous journalist known for financial exposés. He began publishing a weekly Valemont watch, a slow-drip nightmare of embezzlement hints and shady asset transfers. Selim's partners began pulling out. Investors hesitated. The cracks widened. Meanwhile, I began targeting Serafina socially. I sponsored 3 new designers she once blacklisted from the Ainsworth Gala. I praised her enemies, befriended her ex-assistants, and aligned myself with her competitors. At a fundraiser, I accidentally wore the exact custom gown she had debuted the month prior. But mine was redesigned, enhanced, perfected. By the end of the evening, whispers ran rampant that Serafina was losing her edge. She smiled through gritted teeth when we posed for photos, and I whispered sweetly into her ear, "Don't worry, sister. Imitation is flattery, until it becomes replacement." The final blow of the season came at the annual Blackwater Gala, a lavish event hosted by the city's wealthiest to parade morality behind million-dollar donations. This year I was asked to curate the event's main art installation. I called it Phoenix in Reverse. A life-sized sculpture of a woman caught mid-transformation, half reborn, half in ruin. The ashes beneath her feet shimmered like obsidian, and the wings sprouting from her back were scorched gold broken in one place. People whispered. Critics praised it as a triumph of duality. But Serafina knew the truth. It was her. It was me. It was us. And Selim, he stood before it stunned. Perhaps he recognized the pose. The same way I had stood on the ice before I died. "Is it a symbol of survival?" someone asked me. "No," I replied softly. "It's a warning." Not everything in my plan was steel and fire. Some moments surprised me. Arthur Blaine, who once died nameless, had grown into himself under my care. He was sharp now. Confident. His eyes lingered too long sometimes, and his voice softened when he spoke my name. "You're different, Elira," he said once on a rooftop overlooking the city. "Like you've lived 2 lives." I turned to him, pulse unsteady. "What if I told you?" "I have." He smiled sadly. "Then I'd believe you. And I'd still stand beside you." I didn't know what to do with that. Not yet. Weeks later I sent Selim a letter. Handwritten. Sealed with wax. Just 3 lines. "You built a kingdom of lies." I remembered every brick. "Come see what truth looks like." It was an invitation to an exclusive showing at my private gallery. Only one piece would be unveiled that night. I titled it, "The Man I Let Burn." A mirrored room. A single canvas. Selim's face, distorted, half ash, half gilded. All around him, shadows of the people he used to step on, now painted larger than life, stepping over him. When he arrived, surrounded by journalists and flashing cameras, I met his eyes and smiled for the photos. He knew. I had become untouchable. And his fall had only begun. The headlines were relentless. Valemont in crisis. Offshore scandal deepens. Ainsworth heiress accused of insider manipulation. Who is Elira Ainsworth really? Every article was a blade, crafted from truths I released and lies I nurtured. I read them all over morning tea like scripture. The world was beginning to question the golden dynasty of Selim and Serafina. Just as I planned. But as their towers crumbled, something unexpected emerged from the debris. A name. A reporter, too clever for their own good, started tracing connections, whispers, and silent donations. One of my gallery shows was linked to Marianne Vaux. Another tied back to Arthur Blaine's early investments. Someone noticed a pattern. They asked, how did Elira Ainsworth go from forgotten daughter to rising queen? I had built my empire in the shadows. But now the light was creeping in. It wasn't dangerous. Yet. But it was close enough to feel the heat on my back. So I stayed the course. Selim and Serafina, for the first time, were no longer hosting the city's galas or appearing in press photos together. They were unraveling publicly. Selim's associates whispered that he'd lost control of the Valemont legacy. Serafina had reportedly stormed out of a shareholder meeting, citing a betrayal she would never forget. I watched from a distance behind my glass walls and curated smirks. But even as the puppets tangled in their own strings, I felt the air shift. Because the one person I hadn't expected to betray me did. Adrian Ainsworth. My adoptive brother. Quiet. Dutiful. Always lurking in Serafina's shadow. Always too loyal to truly speak up. In the past he had been forgettable. Kind in a vague way. Easy to overlook. But in this new timeline I had shown him attention. Built him up. Encouraged his independence. I had thought I was guiding him out of her control. I was wrong. Adrian approached me one afternoon in the greenhouse, where Mother used to keep her rare orchids, and where Serafina had once pretended to cry after stealing a deal I brokered. "Alira," he said, hands folded too neatly, "I need you to stop." My smile didn't waver. "Stop what?" "This crusade. Against Serafina. Against Selim. You're twisting everything. You've become dangerous." There was genuine sorrow in his voice. Not malice. Just fear. And guilt. "You're working with her, aren't you?" I asked. He looked away. That was answer enough. "She said you were spiraling," he whispered. "That you needed help. That maybe you never recovered from the accident." My fingers curled into fists, nails biting into my palm. That's what she was selling? That I was mentally unstable? That this was grief, not strategy? "How much did she offer you, Adrian?" I asked. My voice was calm, but it echoed like thunder in the glass space between us. "She's still our sister," he began. "No. She's yours. She's always been yours." I walked away before I could say something unforgivable. But inside me a storm howled. Adrian's betrayal hurt. Because it wasn't ambition or greed. It was weakness. And weakness could destroy everything. That night I returned to the Ainsworth garden. There was a tree, an old weeping willow, that had been planted the year I arrived in the family. It was Serafina's idea, to commemorate their act of kindness. She used to tie ribbons to its branches like they were badges of charity. I took an axe to it. Not out of rage. But ceremony. Each swing was a memory. A dismissal. A slap at dinner. A stolen idea. A cold stare. A whisper of "you'll never be one of us." The tree fell silently. I buried the ribbons. And planted something new in its place. A single black rose, blooming out of season. I didn't just want to destroy their world. I wanted to replace it. While Selim tried to salvage Valemont and Serafina waged war in boardrooms and tabloids, I quietly launched Alira Enterprise, a boutique consulting firm specializing in creative restructuring, legacy branding, and philanthropic image repair. It was a front, but also a crown. Clients poured in, startups, disgraced heiresses, politicians caught in scandals. I didn't just fix reputations. I rewrote them. Every success made me louder. More visible. And with that visibility came a new threat. Because Serafina wasn't going to let me become the star of a world she once controlled. She invited me to a private event, a rebranded Ainsworth Foundation gala, meant to restore faith in the family. Selim would be there. So would the press. And the elite. I accepted, of course. I wore red. Not subtle. Not innocent. A color that said, "I survived your fire. And now I am the flame." Serafina opened the night with a speech about family resilience. I stood at the back, drink in hand, smiling like a ghost come home. Then she dropped her bomb. "Tonight," she said, "we honor not only the future, but the healing of the past. Which is why we've chosen to formally reinstate Alira into the family trust." The crowd gasped. Journalists scribbled. It was bait. She wanted me on record back under the Ainsworth name so she could control my narrative. Claim my victories as hers. Use my rising star to polish her crumbling image. I walked up slowly, accepted the symbolic scroll she offered. And then I leaned into the mic. "I'm honored," I said. "But I must clarify, this reinstatement is purely symbolic. I've built something greater than the trust could offer. And unlike some, I don't need to stand on someone else's grave to reach the top." Gasps. Serafina's smile cracked. Selim turned pale. And I walked away before they could stop me. That night, I returned home and sat on the edge of my bed for hours. I had everything I once dreamed of: power, presence, fear. But Adrian wouldn't return my calls. My old nanny, Mrs. Hart, who raised me like her own child, sent a letter saying she was worried. And Arthur kissed me. Just once. It wasn't fire. It wasn't comfort. It was something in between. "Don't lose yourself, Elira," he said. But hadn't I already? Was the girl who once pulled Selim from a car wreck still inside me? Or had I buried her beneath my plans and pain? I didn't have the answer. I only had the next move. The fallout from the Ainsworth Gala rippled across the city like smoke from a slow-burning fire. My name, once spoken in passing, now danced across headlines and cocktail conversations. Elira Ainsworth, the silent sister who rose from the ashes. Power, poise, and revenge. A new matriarch emerges? They called me brilliant, unforgiving, but none of them called me what I truly was. Dangerous. Not yet, at least. In public I smiled. Curated. Controlled the narrative with surgical precision. My new team of PR architects followed my cues without question. But behind closed doors I could feel the consequences pressing in. Not from Selim. Not from Serafina. From within. I saw it first in the mirror. The way I didn't recognize my own reflection. The set of my jaw. The ice behind my eyes. A face sculpted by war, no longer capable of softness. Arthur noticed too. "You're burning out," he said gently one evening in my studio. The room was quiet except for the sound of brush against canvas. My one remaining refuge. "I'm building," I corrected. "That requires heat." He tilted his head. "And what are you going to do when there's no one left beside you in the ashes?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I had built a machine around my pain. And like all machines, it had no heart. It just ran. Relentlessly. I underestimated her. I thought Serafina would crumble under pressure. That she'd retreat into damage control and cosmetic distractions. But she came back with something I hadn't seen coming. Compassion. She launched a public initiative focused on mental health. Donating millions, speaking candidly about watching someone she loved struggle silently. He never said my name. He didn't have to. She painted me as unwell. Unstable. A genius with a shattered mind. And the worst part? It worked. The same headlines that once praised me now started to question. Is Elira Ainsworth too brilliant to trust? A portrait of genius or madness? I saw the comments flood in. The side eyes at events. The cautious smiles from investors. They didn't doubt my intellect. They feared it. While I was fighting the narrative war, I missed something important. Mrs. Hart, my old nanny, passed away in her sleep. No warning. No goodbye. I found out through a brief message from her caretaker. I was in a boardroom when it came through. Reading a quarterly report. Mid-sentence. I stared at the screen, unblinking for a full minute before excusing myself. I didn't cry. Not at first. I went to her house that night. Alone. Walked through the halls of her small lavender-scented home. Touched the framed photos. Sat in her chair. And there, in the dark, I wept like the girl I used to be. Mrs. Hart had been the only one who ever loved me without condition. Without performance. Without expectation. And I hadn't been there. Because I was busy playing queen. It was raining the night he showed up. Uninvited. Unannounced. Drenched from head to toe, looking like a man who had forgotten what pride was. "Elira," he said. "Let me in." I should have shut the door in his face. Should have laughed. But instead I stepped aside. He stood in the center of my living room, tracking water across my floors, eyes wild and bloodshot. "They've frozen the accounts," he said. "Our partners are pulling out. The board's talking about voting me out of Valemont." "Good," I said quietly. He stared at me. "You did this." I tilted my head. "You think I'm that powerful?" "No," he whispered. "I think you've become something else. Something terrifying." There was no flattery in his voice. Just awe. And fear. He stepped closer. "I used to love you." "No," I said. "You loved that I needed you." Silence. Then softly, "You're right." He left without another word. And for a moment I wanted to follow him. Not because I still loved him. But because a part of me missed the girl who once did. 2 days later I held a press conference. Not to respond to Serafina. Not to defend myself. To claim the power. I stood in the ballroom of a newly purchased heritage estate, once owned by a Valemont cousin who went bankrupt. I had renovated it with cold marble, dark velvet, and a massive central chandelier shaped like a phoenix mid-rise. Behind me a new logo. No full name. Just the initials. Legacy isn't inherited, I told the cameras. It's built. Sometimes through fire. Sometimes through blood. But always through truth. I didn't smile. I didn't perform. I just stood there, unshaken. And the world saw me not as a wounded woman or a cunning orphan. They saw a ruler. And rulers don't ask for permission. A week later Marcus Rowan contacted me again. I have something for you, he said. Valemont's been laundering money through a non-profit front. It's worse than we thought. You expose this, Selim doesn't just lose the company. He goes to prison. I stared at the file for hours. This was it. The kill shot. But something in me paused. Because prison wasn't poetic. It was permanent. Brutal. Irreversible. And for the first time I questioned if I wanted ruin or if I just wanted to be seen. Was destruction justice? Or ego? I slept on it. Then deleted the file. Arthur confronted me after the press conference. You're building something incredible, he said. But you're alone. And you don't have to be. He offered partnership. Real partnership. Not in revenge. In life. He believed in the person beneath the vengeance. The girl who once sketched portraits in the garden. The one who remembered birthdays. Who forgave too easily. I don't need saving, I said. I'm not trying to save you, he replied. I'm trying to stay. It was the first time I didn't have a response. The city had begun whispering a new story. Not about Serafina. Not about Selim. But about me. Elira Ainsworth. The dark horse, the phoenix, the fallen girl turned storm. And somewhere in those whispers I heard the shift. Not fear. Not scandal. Respect. But with it came a price I hadn't counted on. Power doesn't keep you warm. And the higher I rose, the further I felt from the girl who once drowned beneath a winter lake. He requested a meeting. Privately. No media. No lawyers. No advisors. Just us. I almost didn't go. But some doors, you walk through just to see who still waits on the other side. We met at the Valemont Chapel, a symbolic ruin. It had once been the venue for our joint family ceremonies. Now it stood stripped of its stained glass, its pews hollowed by decay and time. I found him kneeling at the altar. Rain leaked through the cracked ceiling. Wind whispered through shattered arches. It was like standing inside a cathedral of broken promises. He didn't rise when I entered. Didn't speak. Selim, I said, the name now foreign on my tongue. Still silence. Then finally, I'm sorry. I froze. He looked up. Eyes haunted, gaunt with sleeplessness. The prince of privilege now reduced to bone and regret. You were right, he whispered. About everything. About her. About me. I didn't speak. I wanted him to keep going. I wanted to see how far he would fall. I married Serafina to save my name. Not because I loved her. She offered control, image, legacy. But every day, every night, I remembered your face. The night of the accident. The girl who pulled me out when she should have let me burn. His voice cracked. I hated you for it. Because you saw me at my weakest. And you still chose me. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, you don't get forgiveness. Not here. Not now. This isn't a confession booth, Selim. This is the graveyard where we buried what could have been. He closed his eyes. And then he did something that shocked me. He removed the Valemont signet ring from his finger. And placed it on the floor between us. I'm done pretending to be king, he said. If you want to finish what you started, do it. Destroy me. I picked up the ring. Turned it in my fingers. So much weight for something so small. Then I placed it back beside him. I don't need to finish anything, I said. You've already undone yourself. And I left him there in that ruined chapel, kneeling before the ghost of a girl he once condemned. But where Selim yielded, Serafina sharpened her blade. She filed a lawsuit, accusing me of orchestrating financial sabotage and reputational warfare. The media exploded. Sister versus sister, Ainsworth war goes public. Is Elira's empire built on lies? She wanted to push me into a corner. To force me to fight where she felt most powerful. Under scrutiny where perception could be manipulated. What she didn't know. I'd already prepared for this. My legal team had gathered months of evidence. Documentation of her backdoor deals. Blackmail attempts. Fabricated records. Intimidation against whistleblowers. And then there was the real bombshell. A video recording. Serafina. Drunk. Raging. Screaming at Selim in their private suite. Unaware the security cameras were still active. She's just a foster mistake. She's not even real blood. And yet everyone looks at her like she's some kind of goddess now. But I'll fix it. I always fix it. Even if I have to destroy her. The clip was 32 seconds long. That's all it took. I didn't release it. I didn't have to. I sent it to her attorneys. And said nothing. The lawsuit was dropped within 24 hours. The Ainsworth estate dining room had once seated 20. Lavish. Golden. Grand. Now I sat alone at the head of the table. A single place setting. A single flame in the chandelier above. I poured wine. Red. Thick. The kind Serafina used to prefer. Across from me an empty chair. You taught me power was perception, I said aloud. But you forgot that truth can be louder than any illusion. I raised my glass to no one. To the lies that made me. And the silence that saved me. And drank. Arthur remained my constant. Steady. But something had changed between us. Not love. That was still there. But caution. He watched me the way someone watches a fire. Not afraid but aware that it could still turn on you. You're winning, he said one night. But I think you're afraid of what happens after the war. I'm not afraid, I replied. He smiled but didn't argue. We didn't kiss that night. We just sat. Quiet. Together. And sometimes that was more intimate than anything else. Then came the letter. No signature. Just one sentence. You were never supposed to be reborn. Attached a photo. Me. Drenched. The night I drowned. But this photo was taken from above. Like a drone or surveillance shot. Which was impossible. Or so I thought. My hands trembled. Someone had seen me that night. Someone wanted me to die. Someone was still watching. The photograph haunted me. Taken from above. Grainy, distant but real. It captured me the night I drowned in my past life. My hair tangled in the black lake water. My arms floating limply at my sides. The timestamp scrawled at the bottom corner. December 23, 2:16 a.m. The exact moment I let go. But this wasn't an accident. Someone had recorded it. Which meant someone had been there. Watching. Waiting. And they let me die. Or worse, they ensured it. I showed the photo to Arthur. He didn't flinch. Whoever took this had tech. Surveillance grade. Military maybe. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was calculated. That word again. Calculated. I revisited every angle. Every conversation. Every silence from the old timeline. Who would have benefited most from my death? Who had the reach to erase me from every family trust, every business deal, every social circle? It had to be someone above Serafina and Selim. Someone who wanted me gone, not just forgotten. Arthur started tracing digital breadcrumbs. I pulled favors from clients I'd protected. Even Rowan, the old manipulator from Vailmont's board, gave me a name, reluctantly. Look into Dominic Ray, he said. But be careful. Ray isn't like the others. He doesn't want power. He wants permanence. Dominic Ray. I had heard the name before once. At a charity auction Serafina refused to let me attend. Dominic Ray was an investment magnate. Quiet. Old money turned ghost money. He never appeared in the press, never sat on boards publicly, but somehow he was always in the margins of major takeovers, mergers, scandals. A kingmaker. And apparently, a judge. I found an old portfolio tucked away in the Ainsworth archives. It listed Ray as a strategic consultant during the year I was adopted. He advised on my integration into the family for optical benefit. I wasn't brought in for love. I was an asset. A marketing move. And when I stopped serving that purpose, they tried to erase me. I arranged a meeting. Not under my name, of course. I used a shell identity tied to a shell fund. The bait. A potential deal for a legacy stabilization trust. Exactly the kind of project that would draw Ray out from the shadows. He came. Gray suit. Black gloves. As like ash. He studied me for several seconds before speaking. You're not the heiress I expected. I get that a lot, I said coolly. A beat passed. Then he smiled. A small sharp thing. You look just like her, he said. Like who? Your mother. My blood turned to ice. Until then I believed the story I had always been told. That I was adopted at age 9, a foster case with no known lineage. The Ainsworths had given me their name, their home, and eventually their indifference. But Ray's words cracked that foundation. I dug deeper. Paid archivists to unseal protected records. Tracked down midwives. Former house staff. Nurses with fading memories. The truth unraveled slowly. I wasn't a stranger. I was Ainsworth by blood. A bastard daughter from an affair my adoptive father had long buried. Not adopted. Erased. In the west wing of the Ainsworth estate was a sealed room. No one entered. No one spoke of it. I broke in. Inside were boxes. Photos. Journals. Receipts. Evidence of an affair, a pregnancy, a scandal. Covered up with money and manipulation. My mother had worked in the family's vineyard. She had been quiet. Kind. Beautiful. She had died under mysterious circumstances. And Dominic Ray had handled arrangements. I stood in that dust-choked room and wept. Not for the mother I never knew. But for the girl they told me I wasn't. Dominic Ray wasn't just an investor. He was an architect. He had designed dynasties. Manipulated legacies. Managed scandals like a playwright edits a script. My death would have served him perfectly, removing the last stain of an old secret, while solidifying the merger between Selim and Serafina as the future of both families. But I had ruined his play, and now I was rewriting the ending. I met him one final time, this time under my real name. We sat across from each other in a glass tower overlooking the city. I wore black. He wore gray. We looked like pieces on a chessboard. You've become dangerous, he said. No, I replied. I became necessary. He leaned forward. What do you want? I want you out. Of everything. The trust. The holdings. The influence. You disappear. He tilted his head. And if I don't? I placed a folder on the table. Inside, every document tying him to blackmail, embezzlement, and indirect conspiracy to cover up a death. Then I release this. And the empire you built turns to dust. He looked at the folder. Then at me. And nodded. One slow, defeated motion. Before he left, he said something strange. I tried to kill you not because I hated you, but because you were hers. And she was the only one who ever refused me. Then he walked away. Out of my life. Forever. I didn't make a public announcement. Not yet. Revelations that deep, that devastating aren't shouted. They're revealed in silence. In strategy. In storms no one sees coming until the windows shatter. First I confronted the Ainsworth board. They hadn't seen me in weeks. Rumors spread that I'd left the country. Some thought I'd stepped down. Others hoped. So when I walked into the boardroom that morning, dressed not in silk but in a steel-gray power suit, no jewelry, no smile, they sat up straighter. I want to talk about blood, I said. The room went still. What about it? Asked Gregory Shaw, the acting chair. An old family ally. Loyal to a fault. Or fear. I want it on record, I said, placing a folder on the table. That I am not adopted. That I am Richard Ainsworth's daughter. His firstborn daughter. Silence cracked like thunder. Inside the folder, notarized DNA tests, concealed birth certificates, proof of hush money payments, and a signed statement from a former board secretary who had kept copies of the original documents. They flipped through the pages with shaking hands. You understand what this means, Gregory finally said. I understand that the seat Serafina stole was always mine, I replied. And now I'm taking it back. The press came next. I held a private press conference, not for spectacle but clarity. I stood on a marble balcony, flanked by nothing but the Ainsworth crest behind me and my own words in front of me. No empire stands forever, I said. Not when it's built on lies. I didn't drag Serafina's name through the mud. I didn't need to. I told my story in fragments, just enough for the public to piece together the betrayal, the concealment, the lengths to which power had tried to erase me. I was born into this legacy. Not as an outsider. As a rightful heir. I was hidden because my existence didn't fit the narrative they wanted. But now the story belongs to me. It made headlines around the world. Forgotten heir reclaims throne in Ainsworth legacy twist. Alira Ainsworth's blood revelation shakes high society. She was erased. Now she's leading. And just like that, the world didn't just watch. They followed. Serafina tried to respond. She published a half-hearted statement about family complexities and misunderstood timelines. But the damage was done. For the first time, her polished composure cracked under scrutiny. Brands began distancing from her. Silent partners pulled out of her wellness fund. Even Selim, now stripped of power and influence, stayed silent. The wolves who once followed her scent now turned toward mine. But with their eyes came expectations, demands, shadows. And a single question echoed louder than ever before. Now that I had it all, what would I do with it? I returned to the estate. This time I walked in without permission. The staff hesitated but didn't stop me. Some of them even nodded. I moved through the halls I used to haunt like a ghost. The portraits of ancestors stared down at me with painted indifference. But I didn't flinch. I stepped into the main dining hall. Serafina was already there. Dressed in white. Staring at the head of the table. You came, she said. I always belonged here, I replied. A beat of silence. You got what you wanted. No, I said, walking toward the seat. I got what was mine. Then I pulled the chair out. And sat. But I didn't stop there. I turned Ainsworth on its head. I ended backdoor partnerships. Replaced figureheads. Appointed marginalized visionaries into real positions of influence. I reopened the foundation under new direction. Focused on education, not optics. And I started something bold. A creative innovation lab under my name. The Alira Initiative. It wasn't just a statement. It was a war cry. A declaration that this legacy would no longer be built on silence, but substance. And for the first time, people believed in it. Not because of my last name, but because I earned it. Arthur stayed. Not as a bodyguard. Not as a shadow. As an equal. He walked beside me at events. Took meetings on my behalf. Pushed back when I spiraled too deep into strategy and revenge. But more than anything, he saw me. And one night, beneath the same starlit balcony where Selim once swore false promises, Arthur asked a simple question. Would you ever leave all of this? I looked out over the estate. The city lights. The empire. No, I said. But I'd share it. That was enough. He kissed me, not like someone staking claim, but like someone finally coming home. But just when I thought the past was settled, the letter came. Written and signed. Inside, a photo. Of Dominic Ray. Dead. Parent suicide. No investigation. But on the back of the photo, one sentence was scrawled in red ink. You were never the only one. Attached, a list of names. More girls. Hidden daughters. Forgotten sons. People buried in scandal and silence just like me. I stared at the list until my vision blurred. And I knew. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something far bigger. The list burned in my hands. Names. Faces. Lost children. Whispered scandals. Illegitimate heirs swept under the velvet rug of high society. Just like me. But these weren't just stories, they were mine. Variations of a life that might have been. A network of lives extinguished before they could threaten the balance of power. I called it what it was. A system. A machine. A quiet massacre hidden in plain sight. And at the heart of it was Dominic Ray. Now dead. But the rot he'd built lived on. If I wanted to finish what I started, I had to go deeper than revving. I had to reveal the design. With Arthur's help, I investigated each name. Some were long dead, faked suicides, tragic accidents. Others were alive, hidden behind new identities, bound by ironclad NDAs and threats of ruin. But one name stood out. Maeve Hart. A woman in her 50s. Quiet. Once a whistleblower for a global philanthropic trust. Discredited. Institutionalized. Vanished from the media. I found her in a private care facility outside Edinburgh. Her hair was silver now, but her eyes, steel and knowing, held the storm I once drowned in. You're one of his, she said when I walked in. A child they buried but didn't burn. I sat across from her. They didn't bury me deep enough, I replied. She smiled. and told me everything. The conspiracy stretched decades. A consortium of elite families, Ainsworth, Valemont, Darrow and more, had collaborated in covering up illegitimate children to protect bloodlines and business holdings. Dominic Ray had designed it. He called it the Purity Accord. Each time a scandalous child was born, Ray's team intervened. Fake adoptions, sealed records, silent payouts, and if needed, final measures. Maeve had tried to stop it once. Exposed a Darrow child's erasure. They institutionalized her within weeks. What stopped them from killing you? I asked. She smiled bitterly. They thought madness was a better death. I returned to the Ainsworth estate for the last time. In the central garden where I once buried the ribbons of my past, I built a bonfire. One by one I tossed in copies of every false record, every erased name, every silent bribe. A burning testament to a legacy built on the backs of the forgotten. Arthur stood beside me. "You're not just burning the house down," he said. "I'm purifying it." The flames reflected in my eyes. Not fury. Not vengeance. Purpose. "I'm going public," I said. Arthur nodded. "Then I stand with you. No matter the fallout." And there would be fallout. But I wasn't hiding anymore. The documentary aired 2 weeks later. Erased, Bloodlines Buried, produced under an anonymous trust. Narrated by survivors. Featuring Maeve's testimony. And mine. I didn't hide my face. I owned it. For the first time the world saw the full truth. How dynasties preserve their thrones not with virtue but violence. How girls like me were always collateral. How silence was never safety. The backlash was immediate. Ainsworth and Valemont shares plummeted. 3 CEOs stepped down. 2 political families were exposed. Investigations launched across 4 countries. And people, real people, started asking the right questions. But not everyone was angry. Survivors reached out. Letters. Messages. From people like me. People who thought they were alone. I visited Serafina once more. She'd retreated to a countryside villa, far from cameras, far from the ruins of her curated kingdom. She opened the door herself. No staff. No pretense. "You won," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I just stopped losing." We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked the question I'd waited years to hear. "Did you ever love me?" I stared at her. "My sister by name, not by choice." "I loved the idea of you," I said. "Before I learned what you were capable of." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Do you hate me?" "I don't need to," I said. "You'll live with the truth now. That's punishment enough." She didn't argue. And that was the real ending between us. Not rage. Not war. Just silence. Months passed. The world didn't end. It changed. The Illyria Initiative became a movement, offering legal aid and investigative support to buried children of scandal. I stood at the helm not as a figurehead, but as proof that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. I gave interviews. I told the truth. But I never played the victim. Because I wasn't one anymore. I stood once more at the lake. Where it began. Where I died. The winter had melted. The water was calm. Arthur stood a few paces behind, silent. I removed the pendant I'd worn since childhood. The one Serafina had given me after the first time I was publicly humiliated. A trinket of false affection. I kissed it. Then threw it into the water. A goodbye to the girl who begged to be chosen. As now. I choose myself. Think.